What's going on, you guys? Today we're going to be going over all the fire phase spells and finding out, in my opinion, which ones are the best and which ones are straight doo-doo poo-poo stinky. So if you enjoy content like this, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any of the future videos going over all the other elements to find out the rankings for all the other ones as well. I've already done a tier list on the wood spell, so be sure to go check out that video. Before we start off, I do want to say that I have 52 levels in the metal tree, so that is giving me 35% decrease in spirit cost for wizardry spells. So normally, they do cost a little bit more. I'll be taking this off for future videos so it saves on any confusion. Anyways, into the rest of the video. The first starting spell you get is the Blasting Flare. This spell emits an eruption of flames to the front of you. Basically, just as a quick little explosion, low spirit cost of 275, its damage is actually pretty decent. But I will say, I come across a lot of enemies who are resistant to fire, so it definitely doesn't hit too hard on these basic grunt mobs here. Funny enough, I did an entire video based on purely this spell for PvP, and as I said there, it's extremely strong. So strong you can purely use it as your main source of damage if you want to for PvP. So with that being said, it having a quick cast time, low spirit consumption, with a pretty decent amount of damage, I'd put this spell in the A category. The very next spell is called Firebolt. It hurls a mote of fire in front of you and you are able to spam it to send out multiple at a time. It only uses up 170 spirit for each cast, so it's definitely something easy to spam, but with how low its damage actually is, it's definitely not really worth spamming it since your basic attack, depending on your weapon, will hit just as hard and just as fast. For PvP, it's actually hits surprisingly hard. Not as hard as others, but for the spirit cost to damage ratio, it's actually really good to use as a safe damaging spell. Something I'll consider using in a future video for sure, so I'll put these in two categories. For PvE, it's pretty much like D tier, but then for PvP, I'd still put it in a B tier. It's not bad, it's definitely usable. The next spell we're going into is Flame Weapon. Just like I said in the last video, probably what I'm gonna say in every video, any of these elemental imbued is instantly an S tier for PvP and PvE. Very powerful spell, works with any build you want, free extra damage, you can't complain, would recommend. And then going into our next spell, we're using Scorch Comet, which discharges a large ball of fire to the front. It has a huge charge up time using this fireball, and it weirdly has 2 hits to it for some reason. The flame itself has a hit, and then there's for some reason a neutral melee hit to the extra damage. I really don't know why. But that's large charge up on it for only around 200 damage. That sucks. That's pretty bad, honestly. Not to mention the huge spirit cost to even fire this thing. Like, what's the point? I'll be honest with you, I'm not even going to attempt to use this in PvP because I already see how horrible it is. Too slow to even use as a wake-up attack. The only way I'd ever catch someone is if they were AFK. This spell is going straight into the D category. Really, don't even waste your time. The next spell is Burning Flamewave, which summons a continuous eddies of flame in front of you. This deals damage over time to any enemy that comes in contact with it. This spell only really seems good to accumulate burn to a target. The damage over time it's okay, but with a huge spirit cost of 445, doesn't really seem worth the spell slot. In PvP, it actually does a whole ton of damage, weirdly enough, but obviously, in this clip, the host is very dumb and doesn't mind just standing in the flames apparently, but it's definitely more viable in PvP than it is in PvE for sure. Again, 2 different rankings for this one. D tier in PvE, I don't really see much of a point to it, and then I'd actually give it a B tier in PvP. Good for extra damage or to control the battlefield, but most people aren't just going to sit there in it, so good luck with that. And then it's time for the big and beautiful Amplify Damage. This is the next one on our list, and this spell is easily one of my favorites in the entire game. It says that, for a certain period of time, increase both the damage you deal to enemies and receive from them. Basically a glass cannon spell, but only needing 8 levels in the fire virtue, every build you ever have on should have this, no matter what. Looking here, every time I counter an attack on this enemy, I hit for 81 damage. Once I apply Amplify Damage, I now hit for 103. I gain 22 more damage just for activating this buff, on top of it boosting all of your damage. So say you apply an elemental weapon buff, then the extra damage from that weapon buff also gets increased on the damage, and it can be any element, not just fire. Any type of damage works. This spell is a must-have for how powerful it is. 100% an S tier spell, potentially one of the best spells in the game. Do not neglect this. For the very next spell we're looking at is going to be Surging Blaze, which hurls multiple fireballs in a cone-shaped area of effect. It's basically a shotgun blast of fireballs. The damage on them is pretty low, but it shoots out about 8 fireballs each, dealing 20-ish damage, totaling to around 160 damage. It's not too bad, but definitely not the greatest either. In PvP, it doesn't really do much since you're never able to really shotgun blast in a player standing still like you can with AIs, and you'll never get the full damage of making this, so it's kind of meh to use. Overall, I'd put this in the C category because it's not useless, it's just also not very good. Oh baby, now it's time for Bursting Fireball. This is the next one on the list, and man, this thing absolutely fucks. This spell is one of the highest damaging spells in the fire tree and possibly even in the game. It says it hurls a large fireball that will split into multiple small fireballs and explode after a certain period of time, or upon hitting an enemy or terrain. It is easily clears most tiny mobs in a single cast, and on slow boss enemies, where every fireball hits the mark, does huge amounts of damage. I'm not even going to lie though, where it shines the most is in PvP. If you hit someone with this move, they get fully stun locked in the spell, and it just simply insta-kills them. The spell is honestly too powerful for its own good, but it does have one little downside, which that downside makes me love it for other people who use it against me, which is that it's very easy to deflect spam every attack, meaning anyone who uses it on me, I instantly deflect every single fireball and get full positive spirit, so now I can just spam whatever I want. So it has its ups and its downs, but still with that huge damage it's being able to output, it's easily in the S tier category. And then for the next spell to go to is going to be Fireblast. It discharges a ball of fire that flies on a gravitational arc and explodes upon hitting an enemy or terrain. And honestly, to this day I still don't get this spell. It's just a worse firebolt spell that costs double its spirit, then does about the same amount of damage, maybe a little bit more. Not worth it in PvE or PvP. D tier spells, sadly I'm not sure why they made this. After that, it's time for Engulfing Inferno, which summons an attack with multiple flame pillars. This is definitely not a spell to use on a single target, especially not a tiny one. However, it is very good for larger enemies or groups because every pillar of fire that comes from the ground has a separate hitbox. So if you are able to hit a total of 5 times with the 5 pillars, then you do tons of damage. Also surprisingly has a very low spirit cost, to which definitely gives it extra brownie points. For PvP, I'll be honest with you, the chances of hitting someone is very low, but if you find someone dumb enough like I did, it definitely packs a punch. Regardless of that, the spell still lands itself in the A tier category because its damage potential is absolutely huge. Next is Overpowered Burst, which makes it so it greatly increases your damage dealt on the next wizardry or martial arts used. Which, this is very strong, but it's not like super necessary, I've noticed. It gives you a ton more damage, but only for one single use of wizardry or martial art, which most martial arts already don't hit super hard unless if it's in PvP. But for PvE, you primarily pair this with wizardries for like a huge amount of damage to melt bosses. Overall though, with its potential high increase in damage, but way too high of a spirit cost, it's only going to get the A tier category. Too situational to be placed higher, in my opinion at least. Next is going to be Scorch Sweep, which emits a stream of fire to sweep within a cone-shaped area of effect. I'll be straight up with you, this isn't even D tier, this is negative F tier. Low damage, locks you in an animation, unless you're point blank with the enemy and attacking, you'll only hit them once. So if you're point blank with them and use it, you'll get multiple hits off, but it's just not worth being locked into this animation for so long, being right next to an enemy. Ass spell, next, F tier, get it out of here. And then, oh boy, another ass spell. Going right into it with Scorch Stream. Basically the same spell as before, except it shoots straight instead of from side to side, but for half the damage. Worthless, just a little bit less worthless than the last spell, honestly. Still an F tier though, like, why are these here? The final spell is going to be Scorch Spinner. So if you thought Scorch Stream is like good, or Scorch Sweep is good, then let me tell you, all these Scorch things are just not good. So Scorch Spinner shoots a stream of fire from both hands, engulfing nearby enemies in flames. Once again, just like the last few, too little damage, locks you in an animation, so you're basically going to constantly get your ass eaten every time you use this, and then anytime in PvP it's just so easy to deflect. It's actually weirdly sad how bad these 3 fire spells are. Now, it's not worthless like the others, I will say that. It's still going into the D tier, but that's all it's got going for it. It's just a little bit better than the others. But that's going to do it for all the fire spells. I was definitely a lot more harsh on these than I'd like to, but I'm just giving it to you straight. There's still some amazing hard hitters in here though, and that make up for those few who were pretty bad, but let me know what you guys think for the rest of this tier list, and where you would have actually put anything in the different category. And that's going to do it for me, everyone. Thank you so much for watching, and be sure to stick around for the next few tier lists of spells over the upcoming days. And make sure you guys have a good one. Peace.